Hello, everybody. Welcome to, oh, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say hire new PR people.
Oh, they should hire new PR people.
Yeah.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to WordCast number 61 here. This is a lot of news this week. Big deal. This is kind of insane. If we have time, there's also going to be a bunch of channel news at the end, but we'll see if that actually happens because there's a lot going on here. So pretty excited for this, though. We're going to go ahead and just jump straight into it and start talking about RTX performance details. Along with, well, as you titled it, bullshittery, which I appreciate. I think that is a very good term, and it's bullshit on both NVIDIA and you. Yeah, you watching. Your fault, too. So, anyway, we'll jump into this.
Yeah, so let's make this clear before we go into all of this. Do not make your purchase decision, final judgments on the product, whatever, until it's ready for release. And we have final drivers and actual games that are, like, ready for release with this stuff. We're going to be talking about some alpha footage for Battlefield with ray tracing on, some benchmarks and stuff like that. All of this can change. It can get better or worse. So this is just what we have so far.
And a lot of it's even speculation, like you sometimes don't even know what card things are running on. Like some of the benchmarks that are synthetic that we're going to talk about, we don't know if it was a 2070, a 2080, a 2080 Ti, or something different. Okay, well, we not necessarily
unless they disabled 3 gigs
unless
of
they
RAM.
disabled RAM or something, or it reported RAM incorrectly, because that could be read inappropriately. So, like he said, we want to make it perfectly clear that no matter what, you should not be ordering or pre-ordering these cards until you know the actual performance from independent reviewers. Unfortunately, at least at the beginning, will not be us. But places like Linus Tech Tips, Gamers Nexus, PC Perspective, wait for them to have information come out on this before you make a purchase decision, because otherwise you might really regret it.
Yeah, and like I've seen some posts that really didn't make sense to me. I've seen people that waited for these graphics cards, did not buy a 10 series because these were coming out in a few months.
Yeah, or we assumed they were.
And now that we've finally started, like we've gotten details as to when we'll know how well they perform and stuff, people are like, oh, I don't like these pre-release performance numbers.
So I'm going to go buy a 10 card.
Yes, at regular price, not even like on sale. Like, I understand if you're getting it for super
cheap. If you can
cheap.
get a 1080 Ti for like $500, just pull the trigger.
The
just do
for
it.
$320?
Or when we saw the 1080 for $320, that was insane. And there's other reviewers out there too saying, if you need a GPU right now, it's fine to do it. From our speculation, as far as we know, you're not going to be horribly disappointed if you buy a 10 series card when the 20 series comes out, but that's not necessarily the point of the 20 series, right? And so if you need a GPU right now, if you're running on a 660 Ti and you've got the budget, and you don't really feel like you can wait, you decided to upgrade to a 4K monitor a month ago and you've been waiting, just pull the trigger.
Or a graphics card died or something.
Yeah, or whatever, but don't buy a 20 series card. Even if you need a card immediately, just buy a 10 series card if you need one right now. Don't buy a 20 series card. Don't pre-order a 20 series card. A, you're going to have to wait. B, who knows how long you're going to have to wait. And C, we don't know anything about them yet. Yeah,
and if you ask NVIDIA how long you have to wait, you might get your order canceled.
Yeah, exactly. Be careful. So we'll talk about that here in a moment. But
so let's get into the Battlefield 5 ray tracing alpha footage. There's mirrors of it now, I think, that what I found earlier today was it. There's footage of it. It's like a 20-minute demo, the one that I watched at least.
Yeah. So, it's a pretty good lengthy demo.
It's running at 1080p, very stuttery. Sounds like it's running on a 2080 Ti.
We can assume. Yeah. I mean, what else settings would they probably even use, right? If there's gonna be any footage of it, it's mostly gonna be done on a 2080 Ti. They're probably not capping anything from a 2080. I would agree,
except that we're seeing 2080s.
Leaked benchmarks. That's true.
Well, not just that, but 2080s are coming out sooner. It looks like 2080s might be getting seeded sooner.
Okay, that could be. So we could be seeing leaks from AIBs and stuff like that, even potentially. And we'll show you some of the footage here, guys, if we can find a proper mirror of it that isn't completely horrible. But a lot of them are really compressed and just don't look that great. And I mean,
again, this is one of those things where, especially with how compressed these videos have been, it's not a good representation of what the game is going to look like when you play it.
Yeah, especially because you can never really get the full example of what a game looks like over a stream or a recording or anything of the sort. You've really got to play it yourself to understand what it looks like, and it's always going to look worse if it's in any kind of compressed format or generally any kind of recorded format, even good display capture and stuff.
And it's especially going to look worse with hand cam footage. I've seen people making big judgments based off of hand cam footage.
Yeah, there's that. And so what I wanted to mention here is I watched some of it before the main good quality video was ripped off YouTube, was still taken down from YouTube. I got to watch about 5 minutes of it, and then I was busy doing other stuff, so I didn't end up continuing from there. And to be completely honest, it didn't look that much better. The lighting was clearly better in specific scenes. Darker scenes were a little bit more obvious that there was ray tracing going on. The lighting looked good. Reflections off water, albeit they actually looked unrealistic, but that's because they were going overboard. That can be fine-tuned, of course. The reflections off water and cars and stuff like that was absolutely beautiful. It was very, very, very good looking, and I think that was the part where it really stood out, like, oh, this is definitely ray tracing, whereas so you didn't know what ray tracing was and they were put side to side, you would say this looks better, but it's not that much different, even though it's a completely different technology. And a little note I put in here
kind of completely different because it is hybrid.
Okay, yeah, right. Which we're going to see that at least for a while. We're going to see hybrid rasterization and ray tracing put together in a game for lighting. And something I also wanted to note was I felt like HDR kind of makes a bigger difference. So, yeah, sorry, quick cut there, guys. But, yeah, what I was saying is I feel like HDR makes a bigger difference than ray tracing in terms of game fidelity if you can get it working and if you've seen it in person. And, of course, HDR is a lot of the effect you get is better lighting, right? Because you see lighting looks more vibrant. And I feel like, to me at least, seeing, like, a street light and looking at it and actually having it be bright and, like, almost hurt your eyes to look at it like it would in real life, that, to me, and it's just a contrast. It's not necessarily that it's actually bright enough to damage your eyes, but just the super increased contrast that you get from that, where it's so much more vibrant, looks more realistic than just some better reflections off water or something. But of course, that's not well, there's two problems there. Is HDR's garbage on Windows, but second is we're seeing the beginning of ray tracing. It's alpha footage.
Third problem, HDR as a standard is garbage.
Yeah. So HDR right now is so convoluted that it's like, is ray tracing going to be less convoluted than HDR?
Ray tracing will probably, at least at the PC level, be consistent and market ready before HDR.
Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah. Because like right now, I have an HDR capable display. You guys, you might, if you look on the channel, you see an unboxing of it. I have a review coming up, but it's not necessarily like full like 1000 nit HDR or anything like that. But when I turned on HDR, if I could get it functional on content that was HDR, it looked great. But anything that wasn't HDR specific content, including the Windows desktop, horrible. Witcher looked like garbage, right? Things like that, where and you could toggle it on and off, and sometimes it would fix things, sometimes it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Absolutely insane. I would be watching like HDR video footage on YouTube, and sometimes it would look absolutely flawless and perfect, and other times I'm like, it looks like a washed out piece of garbage just from toggling it on and off. So, but I just wanted to note to people, I guess, that ray tracing, don't expect it to be this revolution in terms of how game fidelity looks. There's a lot of other different advantages that come from it. You get better reflections and shadows, which are two big things right there, but you also get it's easier for the devs to work with once we finally get it, so you're not having to develop both rasterization and ray tracing.
Or even when you get to the point where you can cut out a lot of the dev time that goes into some of the rasterization tricks. If you can use the ray tracing for things like global illumination, and that cuts out a lot of what you have to do.
Right. Especially, and so like for now, I guess what I meant by until you cut out rasterization and both being needed is for the same given light source, right? Because right now for consoles, for AMD, and for anybody that's not on a 20 series card, so that would have been easier to say, it's, you have to develop the rasterization tech, otherwise it's going to be unplayable, right? So they're doing double duty in these cases, and NVIDIA is, of course, subsidizing a lot of that, I would assume. But it was just interesting to see some of that. Like I said, I'll try and get some footage that we show up there for you guys. If we don't, and we couldn't find anything that looked halfway decent. So,
just in general, something to keep in mind for ray tracing, both for now and for going forward, and what we see it get adopted to. It's far more complicated, both as a tech and both as a benefit, than most people make it out to be. Yeah, it's not just about lighting. It's about development in general. And we won't see the fruits of that for a long time.
And in terms of like effects of how things look, like I said, reflections and shadows are more important than just how well the lighting is distributed on the brick floor that you're walking across, right? Yeah. It's the differences where you get, you know, a little puddle on the ground that is reflecting light in different directions, and you know, your player's wearing a watch, and as they move that watch up, you know, you get to see exactly what the light's doing like it would in real life. And if we can combine that with HDR, that's when we'll see the real big differences. Whereas I can imagine a situation where you have a side-by-side comparison, both perfectly imagine if it was perfect HDR displays, ray tracing on versus off, it would be much more prevalent and obvious how much better ray tracing is in that situation versus a non-HDR display.
Also, though, for games like, I mean, for any game really, but for games like Cyberpunk where you have so many different colors going on, one of the other things with ray tracing is that you can get a better merging of different colored of light sources. Yeah. And so when you have neon lights within Cyberpunk, if you can have that blue and that purple properly merge and you have an HDR display, that's going to make so much of a difference because you get more color. That's one of the benefits of HDR from a gaming perspective.
Yeah, and that's one of the benefits.
More colors available.
Yes.
And so if you can get those colors to merge and utilize that color space, that'll make a huge difference. Exactly. Something that people don't really think about.
It's like 10-bit versus 8-bit displays, and then the HDR is kind of including that into it. Like my display is a 10-bit, it's an 8-bit plus FRC. Not going to get into what that is, but there is a visible difference in the color accuracy and how vibrant the colors are and whatnot on a 10-bit versus an 8-bit panel. And HDR helps bring some of that out. So HDR also isn't just about brightness, unlike what some people have been led to assume with all the people that say you need 1,000 nits for good HDR, which the truth is you don't. There's different aspects of measuring nits in different areas of the screen, how long they have to maintain the brightnesses.
And this goes back to HDR being such a complicated standard because HDR for photography is just contrast. It's just dynamic range as what it says.
Yeah.
Whereas HDR for gaming and video is, as part of the standard now, it's color depth, it's brightness, it's contrast, it's all these
by the VESA
things.
Standard, we should say, what they've classified as it. And also, I wanted to mention something that Daniel and I both, I think, agree on here is ray tracing tech is going to be much more important in a single player based game. And so when like Shadow of the Tomb Raider comes out and the ray tracing is actually polished in it versus Battlefield, it's going to be a much bigger deal because you play those games, and those are the games that I prefer, and you play those for the immersive experience, not for the fast paced action stress level experience, right? And so, in Battlefield, things like that don't make as big of a difference. Whereas like, the puddle reflects nicely, but you're not going to pay as much attention to that. Whereas there are, given moments in a lot of single player games like Witcher and Tomb Raider where you stop and you just go, I just want to look at the scene for a moment and see how pretty this is. You don't have time to do that. But even beyond that, when we finally reach the point where ray tracing is the primary display method, assuming that consoles get ray tracing, which would be the thing required for eventually that will probably happen too. Assuming we get that, then games can be designed around ray tracing and we'll get environments that are better for that. Yeah, and we'll get advantages in FPS games as an example. Battlefield-like games where reflections might be a bigger advantage of using vehicles to see around corners, right? And that is actually a little bit of a concern that came to my mind in a competitive game is people that don't have ray tracing might be at a disadvantage in those scenarios. So if it's a highly competitive game, this is why games like CSGO tend to stick to the same thing for so long, and like Overwatch tend to stick to the same thing in terms of graphics and stuff like that for so long. Is Ultra right? Yeah, but it can mess with the competitiveness of the game, right? Yeah, and I mean they can easily make it so that for tournaments you can't have that. Yeah, they could do that, which would make more sense. Or like, you'd have it so that like the graphic settings adjust when you go into competitive mode, right? So like on Overwatch, for example, they should allow quick play to have the full field of view from an ultra wide rather than cropping it. But then when you click competitive, it just shoots it right down to standard 16:9, so everybody's in an equal scenario. Or they could just give you 21:9 and let the field of view cap out at a certain field of view. So you can still get that field of view on 16:9. I see what you're saying. Yeah. Instead of punishing people for using 21:9, which is what they currently do, because they cut off your vertical field of view. Yeah, if you set it in 21:9 mode. Otherwise, you're cropped in with black bars to standard 16:9. Yeah, horrible. It's really dumb. All right, so next up is some benchmarks that are supposedly of the RTX 2080. So this was pretty interesting. Now, we don't really know for sure, but this was done in TimeSpy. It's just a generic graphics card.
But
yeah, just listed as NVIDIA GPU, which we can assume that it's not something probably from the 10 series and stuff. And a lot of people have been led to assume it's a 2080. It could maybe be a 2070, but that's less likely from our understanding because the 2070 is coming later. Chances are AIBs and developers don't have 2070s yet.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and this is not with final drivers because whoever did this hasn't signed the NDA.
Yeah, which we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a moment.
But yeah, so what we're seeing here is, as far as the actual score that comes out of this, 10,030, which puts it...
Was the GPU specific score, we should mention that.
Which puts it 150 below the Star Wars Edition Titan XP.
Which is the same as any other Titan XP.
Yeah.
They're not overclocked.
I'm just saying this was the...
Yeah.
I like saying the Star Wars one because then we don't have to specify which Titan XP
Oh,
is.
yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so the Star Wars Titan XP.
Yes. And then it puts it about 510 above the 1080 Ti 11 gigabyte.
Now, of course, that is a 1080 Ti reference, we assume, and so an overclocked 1080 Ti, especially in like an add-in board partner, might match this. But
then also an overclocked 2080.
Exactly. So it depends on the overclocking quality of the 2080. It depends on, because we might see, just like with the 10 series, overclocking is less important than it used to be. We might see with the 20 series where overclocking is almost useless because GPU boost is just so good. Yeah. Because you can take 10 different 10 series cards, put them next to each other in exact same circumstances, and they're the exact same card, and you'll get different boost clock speeds because they dynamically adjust according to what the GPU is capable of.
Yeah.
And, that has to do with binning and then the power capabilities. And so we don't even know how well bin this chip was. So there's a lot that plays into, what this means. And of course, this is a synthetic benchmark, so we can't really know everything about it, right?
Especially since this is an architectural change. So
we don't know
do much better or much worse in synthetic benchmarks than it does in games.
Yes.
We could
and NVIDIA has been known to perform worse than, like, say, AMD in synthetic benchmarks in a lot of cases.
Yeah. So, we could be seeing a situation where this performs on par with the 1080 Ti in synthetics and is way better in games or way worse in games or the same.
The point is take it all with a grain of salt. But, basically what it comes down to is if these results are true and if they are representative of the benefit we get in gaming, both of which are unlikely to be perfect, right, because of drivers like he mentioned as well as other changes. But if that's the case, we're looking at very little performance improvement going from the 1080 Ti to the 2080, whereas we saw closer to like 20% going from the 980 Ti to the 1080, right? And so that is something important, I think, for people to keep in mind is we still have a price hike, but you might not be getting much more performance. And
this would mean that the 2080 is performance per dollar about on par with the 1080 Ti's MSRP.
Yeah. So performance per dollar is similar but like you said, in comparison to a 1080 Ti, which performance per dollar is worse than a 1080 versus a 1070 versus a 1060, the sweet spot for performance per dollar.
You're always going to get diminishing returns.
You always get diminishing returns as you go up, of course, but we're maybe seeing that sooner.
The other important thing is that let's say these gaming performance numbers are the same when you're looking at just raw gaming performance.
Yeah.
Well, then we don't know how much of a difference, obviously some games will get a little bit of a benefit from the DLSS stuff, the AI-based anti-aliasing. And so, if we can see, 5% from that, as far as like the baseline, and some games do even better, then sure, it's not much, but 5%. For
we'll
most
take it.
Games,
Right.
Performance per dollar increase that way. So like this generation is so much more complicated to review because there's so many different factors that go in.
Right, and so you can't just look at raw FPS values in games either. And part of being, part of what the PC Master Race community always talks about is being the early adopter of new technologies and being able to, we get all these cool things like 4K gaming before the consoles are even capable of this kind of stuff. And, they're right on that perspective, but people maybe need to not complain so much because we're in a situation here where we're seeing some potentially really, really amazing new graphics tech. And yeah, it might be overpriced because NVIDIA is in a near monopoly situation in the gaming market right now. But you're still seeing some amazing, improvements in potential graphics not necessarily visual fidelity, but technologies. And we're being early adopters of that, where it's like, oh, we can see ray tracing. So what we're really getting at is I think people need to not freak out so much. Until we actually see stuff, don't make early judgments, because we have a lot of the community, I feel like, is criticizing these cards way more than necessary. But we don't know. We can't, we can talk about it. We can conversate about the technologies like we are right now, and about the leaks and the benchmarks, because we're all really excited for new GPUs. We've been waiting so long for it. It's like everybody that was freaking out when there's rumors about, AMD finally releasing a good CPU architecture, all that stuff. It gets us excited, but we need to not make early judgments of the product and necessarily pull the trigger on pre-ordering or buying something else before we actually know what it's like.
Yeah. So yeah, one thing that I've been kind of annoyed by is people seem to be getting really upset or offended that these cards might not be that great. That's fine. I mean, realistically, NVIDIA probably knew where these were going to land.
It's the technologies that we're kind of paying for. The early adoption of the technology is where your money's going, as well as to help line NVIDIA's R&D pockets for potentially a next generation that might come out a lot sooner.
This stuff took 10 years plus to develop. Ray tracing has been in the works for quite a long time.
It has. It's been a big deal, and being able to do it real time has been in the works for a really, really long time as well. And it's cool that we even have something that we can say we can do real time ray tracing, even if it's ray tracing. It's a little bit of ray tracing mixed with rasterization at low quality. It's like you have to take that first step at some point, right? And I think that's what we're trying to, what NVIDIA's trying to push forward here, is that first step. But again, it's hard to make judgments of the product itself. And PCMR community and everybody, instead of freaking out about the GPUs and freaking out about the leaked performance and the pricing and all of that kind of stuff, I think we should hold our judgment. It's okay to freak out and do things like that regarding things like NVIDIA's GPP, when everybody blew up about that. Now, it turns out we were right in that situation. We could have been wrong, but either way, we needed to blow up about it to pull out more information. But in this situation here, the more information, everybody's under such strict NDA, you're not going to get more by yelling. Just wait.
But even then, let's say the card is terrible and overpriced. Just don't buy it. It's not that big of a deal.
Yeah. Just, if they come out and the reviews are that way, just get a 10 series card as quickly as you can. Or guess what? AMD cards still exist. Vega's not bad. Vega 56, if you can get it for MSRP, which you kind of have been able to lately, but of course they came in stock right when everybody started waiting for the 20 series. But Vega 56 is actually a really good performance per dollar card. Vega 64 is pretty powerful. You still got the RX 580 for the mid-tier 1060 competition. So if the 10 series gets wiped out, where they don't sell those anymore, they run out of stock of those because of the 20 series, but the 20 series is overpriced and you don't get much for it, just buy AMD. Give AMD more R&D money to compete with NVIDIA on that high end too, and then we can maybe get some actual competition to bring prices down everywhere. Or if you do have another option right now. It's not like it was when we were looking at Intel's Haswell versus Bulldozer, where it's you really didn't have a choice because Bulldozer was so bad for so many things. AMD's still very competitive in this space.
Yeah. And if you have a 10 series, just don't upgrade if it's not that good.
That too. Don't complain. It's just hold on to what you got.
Not every card or not every new generation is going to be equally better. There's some that are going to be better because of the tech behind them. Probably this one, and then some that'll be better just because of pure performance gains.
Or efficiency, things like that. And so it just depends, you gauge what your needs are, and if you're running a 1080 Ti or dual 1080 Ti's, that's what I so happen to be running. I got to display that once more before the 20 series comes out and owns me. But it's like if you're running a series like that, you're running the high-end stuff, you probably shouldn't be upgrading anyway unless you've got gobs of money. If you've worked really hard to get what you have, and we're a small channel, I didn't get those for free. I worked hard. I earned my money to buy those 1080 Ti's. If you're in that situation, just like me, I have no plans to upgrade to a 2080 Ti, even if it's 40% faster.
Yeah.
And I don't think anybody should if you're in that situation. Now, if you have a 1060 and you now are making more money and have enough money to buy a 2080 Ti, that could be regardless, it's a big upgrade for you, right? But just people need to wait for more information, I think, is what it comes down to, a lot of this.
Yeah. And if it's not good, just don't freak out. Who cares? Whatever.
Yeah, just okay, it sucks, it's disappointing, buy something else.
Yeah.
You have another option right now, thankfully.
Or just don't buy a graphics card.
Yeah, unless you really need one, just don't buy one.
At which point buy a 10 series.
Yeah. Well, if they're out of stock, again, you still have another option. People need to make sure that's clear too. AMD still sells cards.
Yeah, but they're also not going to be out of stock. NVIDIA has. We already know about the massive amount that. In fact, I wouldn't doubt if once that sells through, we see a price drop on the 20 series.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me
NVIDIA's
either.
out that money for the 10 series.
Yeah, because we talked about NVIDIA having a influx of extra 10 series Pascal cards, and if that's the case, then yeah, you may be right there too. Yeah. And so the point comes down to wait, make your decision after the numbers.
Yeah, because what I'm thinking too is we saw there was initial reports that with these cards, this was a month or two ago, that they were going to be pretty decent price. I mean, we were looking at like $650 or something for the 2080, which puts it on par with current gen. And then we see it jump in price from the rumors, and we see a rumor that the price changed last minute.
Yeah.
Well, what did we see in between that?
We saw the influx of extra Pascal stuff. Cards. Yeah.
It would make sense that if they have all these cards and they need to sell through them...
They might want you to be like, this is garbage performance per dollar and go buy the 10 series. NVIDIA still makes the money.
Yeah, and then they drop the price for the 20 series when they've sold through that. That way they're not losing a ton of money.
Right, because if they have all these 10 series cards sitting around and they can't do anything with them, and the 20 series is super well priced and super good performance... the 10 series cards are just going to be thrown away eventually 4 years from now when nobody's buying them.
Yeah.
But it
would be unrealistic to expect them to price drop it so much.
Yes.
That it would sell through the same way that up pricing these would be.
Right. Yeah.
So
yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised. I doubt we're going to see it drop to the rumored numbers.
No, I don't think so. But I wouldn't be surprised to see a couple $100. Yeah. Yeah. At least for the top tier and scaling a little less for that, right? Yeah. So, talking about some interesting stuff regarding, NVIDIA's NDAs and
how they're seeding the hardware.
Yeah, some other fun stuff like that.
Yeah, so we got this report out today from, it was...
Hard OCP that originally talked about it, yeah.
And what we heard was that, two things. So, for one...
Actually, I want to remind people, too, Hard OCP is the place that brought us the news about GPP, and they were right about that. They are generally a good source regarding things like this. They have internal sources that they're very good about keeping anonymous, and so take this with less of a grain of salt as you would say like a WCCF
And
tech
they
article.
Discussed this with other reviewers.
Yes, so, yes. Unnamed, of course. Again, they're very good about that. That's why they get this stuff out there.
Yeah. So, essentially, the first thing is that NVIDIA is... essentially picking and choosing who all of the add-in board partners can send review cards to. Now, this immediately sounds like, whoa, what the hell? But when you look at how the industry works, it's actually not that surprising. It's a big change for NVIDIA, and doing it in this specific way...
Because they used to let AIBs kind of choose who to send. Like, here's, you make your GPUs, it's your product, you just buy the GPUs from us, and then you decide who you want to give it to.
And so now what they're doing is NVIDIA is getting the names and contact information of anyone that the add-in board partners are looking at sending cards to. NVIDIA reviews the list and sends back an approved list.
Yeah.
Now that sounds really odd. Yeah, it does. It shouldn't be done.
Yeah, also, we disagree with it, but it's like other people do it. So
AMD does it in a different way. So AMD, instead of picking and choosing who the add-in board partners can send the cards to, they just get the cards sent to them, and then they send out the add-in board partner cards.
At least as far as we understand.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which also ties into why it makes sense that when Vega was coming out, when a few other gens came out, unlike with NVIDIA, where we generally saw, initially it was the reference design, with AMD, we've always seen third-party cards at launch.
Yeah, you're right. We have.
And I never really understood why that was so different.
This kind of makes sense, yeah.
Someone from video cards specifically, he was saying like that's how AMD has worked for quite a while.
And that wouldn't surprise me. Yeah. I mean, I'd still kind of disagree with it, right? And I like the idea of add-in board partners being able to do it because you tend to get more review units pushed out in the market, in the review market, allowing more people like us to make money. Yeah. Not that we get review samples yet for the most part. One thing though that will be, or at least I'll be closely monitoring, and we'll definitely talk about in WordCast, or if it's a big deal, maybe even a dedicated video, is who does and doesn't get the cards. So if we see sites and reviewers that are commonly critical of NVIDIA not get the cards, but ones that are commonly in favor of NVIDIA's stuff that didn't talk negatively about, say, GPP and stuff, do get them, that might be a little more sketchy.
Except we also have to realize with what we're going to get into with the NDA, if they're not willing to sign the NDA, they aren't going to get a card.
Yes, and so there's that too. So it's like, and so we gotta. It's going to be very tough to judge how NVIDIA is playing this, because they might be playing a power card, and being the all-encompassing NVIDIA, manipulating the market, or they might be fine. Yeah,
because for example, on the topic of people critical of them over GPP and stuff, Hard OCP wasn't even sure if they'd get a card. They asked NVIDIA. NVIDIA said yes. They would give them a card.
Yes, but they had to sign
the NDA.
Which is normal. An NDA is normal.
Yes. For those that don't know, so a while back, actually, we had talked about this multi-year NDA that was coming out.
There was some
talk about
rumors
it's that same
it.
NDA, the same one that was leaked. In fact, Hard OCP just linked to the old article they had about it.
Yeah.
And it was a mixed thing for me. Like, a lot of people were really upset about this NDA. Having looked into kind of the wording of it, how some of the things would play out as far as what is considered like proprietary knowledge and whatnot, I didn't really have a problem with it. I have a problem with how it's being used in this specific case, because what NVIDIA is doing is, to get the card, you have to sign an NDA and agree to when the information can be released. That's all normal stuff, whatever. You can't even get the drivers for this without signing the NDA. So if people either buy cards, like if a card goes for sale early or something accidentally, if in this case Hard OCP can get cards elsewhere. There's other ways to get cards, but just in general, you're running the risk for NVIDIA, and this is a very dumb move, of if somebody does get the card and they're running it on non-final drivers and they aren't very clear about that, well, what if it performs worse? What if you're getting reviews that
show horrible performance because of the driver?
Yeah, what if you're getting cards or your reviews where the performance looks worse because NVIDIA wanted to force them into an NDA that doesn't really benefit NVIDIA or anyone from having this? Like, it's not like the information's going to stay proprietary. The drivers are going to go out in a month anyway.
Yeah, so it's just a matter of the early reviewers that get theirs, in other ways. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a problem. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if some of these reviewers managed to get the official drivers sent to them by somebody too. Yeah. And some of these people have great connections for that kind of stuff. But it's just kind of stupid. It's very stupid on NVIDIA to do this, because it's going to make them look bad in two ways. It makes them look like they're trying to be more powerful than they need to be, because you've got to sign this kind of insane NDA that a lot of reviewers aren't going to want to sign if you want to properly review the cards. But a lot of those people are going to just review the cards anyway, because people are going to want to know, and they'll probably, the good sites will even mention, look, these were with the drivers that don't really support this yet, because we didn't get them. That's NVIDIA's fault. Go yell at them. Yeah. So they're hurting themselves in multiple ways with very little benefit from people signing the NDA. Yeah. It seems like they're not getting a lot for the potential damage.
Protect any information, realistically, because this information is going to be out there in a month. And it's not like AMD can make a big GPU manufacturing decision involving ray tracing and drivers in a month.
Yeah, exactly. Tomorrow they announce new 7nm Navi that just like $400 for the top tier card. Pre-order.
But yeah, the whole situation's really dumb. Now, and you had kind of mentioned before, like, what about this might actually help ensure that people that know what they're doing review these cards. And I'm almost wondering, obviously this will take years to know, but if this is a temporary thing, because NVIDIA knows how complicated reviewing this is going to be, involving, you have to actually, try and be reviewing this card properly to do it right. You could very easily make this card look worse than it is by just reviewing hard numbers in NVIDIA unoptimized games.
Yep.
Like, that's easy. If you don't take into account and look at, in the games that currently support it, DLSS, and, also mentioning not every game supports it, things like that, properly looking at ray tracing benchmarks. Like, there's so many complicated things.
So they're just screwing themselves, because it's just making it even harder on the reviewers to...
No, that's not... So what I'm getting at is, I think that NVIDIA could be using this... not the driver's part. I'm talking about the hardware part.
Okay, yeah.
They could be trying to get hardware only to competent reviewers.
Okay, yes. And not even necessarily competent, because I think that's not necessarily the right word, but ones that do scientific analysis versus more like I plugged it into a thing and recorded FPS numbers at max settings on a game, right?
I don't consider that to be a competent review.
Okay,
I think that's
but entertainment review. It's an entertainment review. It's impressions.
I would say that Linus is probably going to, knowing what the tech that's in this, someone like Linus that is an entertainment-focused review would probably be more willing to do the actual work to show DLSS with it on or off. And that kind of thing.
They'll figure out a way to sum it up.
That's what I mean, is like someone that's actually going to do the work to do the review correctly to give you an accurate representation of the hardware so you know what you're buying or not buying.
And so NVIDIA is pushing towards that,
yes,
which
because,
wouldn't be surprising.
And that's why I'm saying it might take a year or two to know this, because if in a few years after this has been reviewed plenty and in the hands of people for a while, they drop that part of it, then okay, I understand why they did it.
Yeah, right.
So...
enough with RTX and NVIDIA news, though, right?
I mean, we'll go back to NVIDIA for a minute later on.
We will. But right now, we'll jump into some AMD news, some interesting things, AMD and Global Foundries and some other stuff. So to first start with some news regarding AMD accelerating their 7nm adoption, basically trying to push it forward. This was reported by Hexus.net. Really great to hear this. Now, Mark Papermaster was interviewed by CRN. He's the CTO for AMD. So CRN's technically like, they're the official source from this. He was interviewed talking about their 7nm parts, and he's saying that they can actually push it out sooner than expected, despite some of the struggles they've run across, which is probably related to Global Foundry, like we're about to talk about. But the 7nm Vega is coming later this year. Probably not gaming, although we can be hopeful, because if we can get 7nm Vega, slightly better performance and way better performance per watt, that right there makes it much more competitive, at least with the current 10 series. But so what it looks like, though, is basically they're going to be adopting 7nm before Intel, of course, but also before NVIDIA. And Intel's their process technology is different. Nanometers isn't a direct measurement, but considering AMD sources from the same places, such as TSMC, as NVIDIA, you can in some ways compare them back and forth, in terms of nanometers. I hope that this happens for gaming cards, but even if it doesn't, I'm excited to see 7nm coming out for Vega. It's going to be good that they're pushing that forward. And then the first 7nm EPYC CPU should be coming out next year, along with Ryzen 7nm. We don't know exactly when next year, but probably somewhere in the first half of next year would be my speculations. That's pretty exciting. I'm excited to see these new parts. I'm excited to see what 7nm is capable of. I'm excited to see if AMD pushes towards 8 cores per CCX instead of 4, and we start seeing 16 cores on the mainstream. I think, though, we might run into the issue of VRMs on motherboards being able to handle that. How is AMD going to handle the socket balancing since they've guaranteed the socket for so long? Because we saw with Threadripper 2, they actually stifled performance in some ways to keep it socket interchangeable, which is understandable in a lot of ways. We're glad they did that, but also they could have made things a little better. They could have added more PCIe and more memory at basically no cost to them, but instead they actually put money into stifling the card to make it socket compatible because they're so dedicated to that. And again, I also want to mention as a reminder, 7nm is not equal to, nanometers is not equal to transistor density directly, and Global Foundries and TSMC's 10nm is much more like their 10nm tech that they've come out with, and their 12 and 14 even, but they're much more like Intel's 14nm tech, and so if Intel ever gets 10nm working, that's still, in terms of transistor density, efficiency, things like that, is going to overstep what Global Foundries and TSMC are capable of. But little news about Global Foundries is they aren't going to be making 7nm anyway. They have completely dropped out of the game. There's been a little bit of rumors going around about this, but considering they're a process company, rumors people don't talk about that much. But they are dropping 7nm and focusing on other areas of the business. From what we understand, TSMC, we know for sure, is going to be the only producer for both NVIDIA and AMD, and so TSMC is going to be having to scale up production on all the 7nm parts. But AMD, Lisa Su from AMD, did mention that the Global Foundries will still maintain a big part of their business. And so what that tells us is there's going to be some 14nm parts and 12nm parts probably still around, and maybe for consoles and stuff like that.
Guess, yeah.
We'll see 14nm, things where cost effectiveness is the absolute most important thing versus the higher end computing parts. We'll see 7nm, and I wouldn't even be totally surprised if we saw like mid-tier and lower tier on the stack of GPUs being like 14nm and the highest end stuff being 7nm. But it's just interesting to see that Global Foundries is just completely giving up. We don't know if it's exactly because they couldn't get it working, or they just didn't have the R&D budget for it.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it was Global Foundries specifically that kept causing it to get delayed.
Yeah, there was some rumors going around about that, and some talk about that, because TSMC, rumor has been well ahead of Global Foundries in terms of process manufacturing for a while. And a lot of this basically confirms that it was really good that AMD was sourcing from both TSMC and Global Foundries and had plans to do that and worked with both of them. Is if they had worked only with Global Foundries like they've done in the past, they would have shot themselves in the foot.
Yeah.
And I mean, of course, AMD being such a huge partner probably could have helped push the development on Global Foundries' side. But basically, they were like, to save us money and effort, we'll go with both. And whoever comes out with the best process first, we'll just stick with theirs.
Yeah.
So I think it's a good move on their part. And that's about it. Just expect some big things from AMD. Probably next year is when we're going to see a lot of AMD stuff. This year, it's probably mostly kind of dead. Other than we might get some middle tier Ryzen 2, which would be really cool. But or second gen Ryzen. And next year, though, I have a feeling we're going to see like Threadripper 3. We're going to see 7nm Ryzen, 7nm Epic. We're going to see Navi. We're going to see 7nm Vega being more popularized. So next year might be a massive year for AMD on both sides rather than just the CPU side.
Yeah, and I really hope that they can step things up on the GPU market and actually compete at the top tier rather than just at the mid.
Yeah, and in terms of competing at the top tier too, it doesn't mean... I know some people that think that, they have to overpass NVIDIA in terms of performance. Not necessarily, just be up there, right? Like Vega 64 was around a 1080, which is still pretty low compared to a 1080 Ti. But just being up there close. It doesn't necessarily have to win out, but being able to win out in certain fronts, such as performance per dollar, or performance per watt, or maybe even both, or better driver stability, which is a thing that's an advantage on AMD's side right now. And I'd love to see that kind of competition in the GPU market. This one was interesting. Intel forcing Microsoft to not use ARM processors.
Forcing, but kind of actually forcing, maybe.
Yeah.
So it's really complicated, but essentially for the Surface Go, Microsoft was originally looking at using an ARM chip.
At least according to Paul Thurrott, who's a very good source for this kind of stuff.
Also, it would make a lot of sense because Microsoft is making a big push to make ARM better for Windows.
They've been putting money into it.
And it's better for battery life and things like that you would want in a Surface Go tablet. Instead, it's using Pentium Gold, and a lot of people were confused about that, but it now looks like we might know why. It sounds like Intel petitioned Microsoft heavily to utilize this. Now, you might be wondering how Intel can just be like, hey, Microsoft, please use Pentium Gold. Like, that's probably not how it went down. We know that Intel has previously threatened to sue Qualcomm over the use of the x86 instruction set.
Yeah,
if they do use that. And so I'm wondering if maybe Intel threatened to sue Microsoft or try and sue to block the sale of the Surface Go.
Yeah.
If
they're flexing their corporate muscles lately because they're feeling pressure on so many fronts, and I can understand Intel being scared because this is an area that they're heavily leading in over AMD in terms of mobile compute, especially hyper mobile compute and ultrabooks and the things like that. And Intel being in the lead in that area, they're trying to hold everything off until they can get their 10 nanometer functioning correctly by using extreme ultraviolet or whatever it so happens to be to get that done. And Intel's flexing their muscles because they don't want to lose that market because they're already starting to lose market in the server space and they will heavily over the next few years, in my opinion. And they're also starting to lose, some desktop CPUs and stuff like that. And we're actually starting to see some fairly high performance, like high class ultrabooks and stuff coming out from AMD, and those are looking like they might actually be really good once the battery life stuff's worked out, which some of it already has been. Intel's feeling pressure from all these directions, and the market can't get that much bigger. So they have to lose market share one way or another, and so they're flexing all of their strength as much as they can to hold that market share, because they know that if AMD gets 30% more market share, it's like that's 30%. That's probably at least 25%. Stolen from Intel. Even if we're talking servers, maybe at least 20%, because things are scaling up, especially on the server end. People are buying more and more server equipment, but you're still in the situation of there's still not unlimited market. So I can see why Intel's doing this, but it's not cool, and it's just another reason to, I think, push more towards my dislike for Intel as a company. Out of the big three players in the desktop PC industry, NVIDIA, AMD, Intel, but even we don't like Qualcomm, but even and Samsung's kind of crazy, but even in those situations, Intel's starting to bother me more because of some of the things that they've been doing. And this is really not cool.
I would be a lot more hesitant to call Intel out and just think maybe they just had a really good salesman do the pitch. If they hadn't tried to or threatened to sue Qualcomm over the x86 emulation.
They very obviously threatened without directly threatening to. It was pretty sketchy.
So that whole situation to me is just no.
Yeah. Now, for those users out there, this still could have ended up better for consumers, because so far ARM on Windows has kind of sucked. They've been doing more work towards it, right? And they have to make more money to make it plausible to push towards that.
It depends, though, because look at who would be buying the Surface Go. People buying the Surface Go aren't people doing hard work, significant performance. Are probably people that would be more okay with using Windows App Store, which works well with ARM. And would give a lot better battery life on something like this.
It would.
So for this specific product, I actually think that they would have been better off with ARM.
I think that could be true, although ARM's performance has been a quirky subject, because it hasn't been, it just doesn't perform that well for, say, video work or something like that. It's been like some applications that use specific parts of the instruction set and stuff just tank and don't work hardly at all, even basic stuff, whereas other applications have been great. And there can be situations where you might actually get better battery life in certain application uses with Intel, because ARM might be at 100% trying to get this done, whereas Intel's sitting comfy at 20% because it's actual x86 instructions.
Well, we also don't know how far Microsoft has made as far as progress on improving.
Because it's been a while since we've seen much from Windows on ARM. If they were going to put it in their own product.
And they have been putting a lot of work into it, because, as we know, there's upcoming laptops coming out with future Snapdragon chips specifically designed for Windows.
So they must be making some kind of progress.
Yes.
Yeah.
If they're already talking specifics of hardware for that, then they must be very confident in it.
Yeah.
So the whole situation is just a big mess, pretty much.
It basically.
Yeah.
But Intel, you're kind of not being cool. Compete by making a better product. Don't compete by being forceful. But maybe I think Intel knows that when they release 10 nanometer, if they can get it working, or even if they somehow go straight to 7, I think they know that it's going to be a big deal, and it's going to one-up the industry again, because they've been so far ahead for so long. But and I predicted that will happen too. I think that's going to happen. Their process technology has been the best on the planet for a very long time for a reason, and they've they produce so many things. Their 3D XPoint is the best memory technology on the planet right now, as an example. But I think Intel's trying to kind of pause the market. Pause the market as much as they can, so that they can release 10 nanometer and steal everything back without losing too much in the meantime. And that's why they're releasing 14 nanometer plus and plus that are just not that big of an improvement.
There was also I think he was a former Intel employee, I forgot his name, but he was a pretty high up guy, so he knows what he's talking about, who was talking about some of the issues Intel's been having, and pretty much he just kind of to sum up all of what he said, it was just Intel's just kind of trying to restructure some things and just move on and get going.
And that's understandable.
They're essentially for their factories and stuff, they're having issues with development of a lot of this. They're just we're just going to redo it all and go.
Yeah.
And they
have the money to do it.
They seem to have, at least from what he was indicating, it sounds like they have a plan for what they're going to do. They just need to finish executing it.
Yeah. And so I think Intel's going to be... I think we're going to see some amazing stuff from them at some point, even though they've been disappointing in the meantime. And that means everybody else push as hard as you possibly can to help balance out the market when that happens from Intel, when they release something that's revolutionary and pulls a lot of the market away.
And I do hope that they can get their 10 or 7 nanometers ready for their GPUs. All right, so back to some bullshit from NVIDIA. So this situation's kind of weird and complicated. So there was a streamer who's talking about pre-ordering the RTX cards, or more accurately, not pre-ordering them.
Yes. Now, to name him, I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm so sorry, but Arkishman Pradhan. I'm so sorry if I said that wrong, but I tried. Yeah, he was the one talking about. He's a pretty good sized streamer, and yeah, it's kind of sketchy what NVIDIA's done to him.
He was sponsored by NVIDIA. Now the sponsorship came with LG, HyperX, and Zotac. Essentially, it was a
whole gaming
PC.
rig.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that NVIDIA doesn't generally in those situations. They don't pay for everything.
They like kind of entice other they entice other partners to sponsor as well.
It's essentially NVIDIA was the lead sponsor and did the work to get this all together, and so NVIDIA was like the core person. Now keep in mind with this, when you are a sponsored streamer, that's very different than being a reviewer or journalist, where you are
your job is to
You're in the case of a sponsored streamer, you are representing the company.
Yeah, that's the whole point is here you have NVIDIA hardware, you have NVIDIA logos, NVIDIA stickers, stuff like this. It's a sponsorship like if, say, NVIDIA or somebody was sponsoring, a Formula 1 race or something, or a NASCAR race, it's like, we're going to slap our logo on there. We're not paying you to say you should or shouldn't buy this product. We're paying you to put our logo on your car so people see it.
Yes.
So that's something to keep in mind, but what's going on here is still not cool, especially because I do think, there's a closer relationship between a streamer and NVIDIA than a car racer and NVIDIA, right? And there's going to be some overlap there of PC enthusiasts and streamers.
Yeah. So essentially, after talking about not pre-ordering these cards, or that you shouldn't pre-order these cards.
Not necessarily talking bad about the cards, but just don't pre-order
They gave a very valid situation. They were talking about the Division. They were saying that, they got burned by pre-ordering the Division, and at launch it was pretty bad. It did get better, but at launch it was pretty bad, and so they felt burned by that, and ever since they just don't pre-order anything. And so I feel like, of all the situations of people saying don't pre-order, that's one of the most valid. You gave context.
Yeah.
And NVIDIA then dropped this person and is requesting the hardware back.
Which means everybody dropped him. All his sponsors.
Yes.
All the ones for this system. Yeah, because
Yeah.
it's all initiated by NVIDIA. So NVIDIA has control over that.
Yeah.
From the way I understand the way that the sponsorship works, he said it's a package deal. Quote. That's what he said. The way I understand it is a way to think about it is NVIDIA is basically saying, hey LG, hey HyperX, hey blah blah blah, you give us this stuff, we're gonna give it to this guy, and we'll tell him to slap your logos on stuff too.
Yeah.
And so NVIDIA can go, hey, give us the stuff back, and the companies that chose to sponsor them, they're dealing with NVIDIA, so they might not even get any return from it, but that's the deal, right? On those companies' front is NVIDIA is still doing the hard work for them. But it's still unfortunate to see this, because it's not like he was saying, I know about these cards and blah, 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 and they suck and you shouldn't pre-order them. He's not talking down on them. He's just saying, don't pre-order them, wait for the performance stats, and this is leading some people now to believe that the performance of the 20 series is going to be a flop and a disappointment. Because NVIDIA is worried about it, whereas you would think if they were like, it's whatever, he's saying not to pre-order, but once the reviews go live, everybody's gonna want them.
Now, this though has me wondering, because with the exception of Tom's Hardware, which we'll get into in a minute, pretty much everyone has been saying the same thing. Like reviewers, streamers, everyone talking about this card has said, do not pre-order it. The only blowback we have seen so far is to this one specific streamer.
Which is a little
So I'm wondering if, and we talked about before, maybe NVIDIA just has some really, let me say this in a nice way, not thoughtful employees who don't think through situations.
Yes.
Or there was something else going on leading NVIDIA to be on the fence with this guy. We
yes,
don't know that.
And there's maybe something in the background that they were like, I don't know about this guy.
When
previously.
I did watch most of this whole stream, and it seemed very good. It's someone I'm actually going to watch going forward. But I don't know if in past streams there was some things done or not. It's the fact that we haven't seen this with anyone else is odd. Yeah, if NVIDIA was just on a, we don't like pre-orders crusade. I think that if NVIDIA hears the blowback from this and is like, no, we didn't want that to happen, they should fire whoever did it.
And then re-sponsor him.
Yes.
And tell him, hey, can you issue a statement that this was a mistake?
And no, NVIDIA should make the public apology.
Okay, that too. But I mean to his viewers also is like, hey, I'm sponsored by them again. They apologized. It wasn't on purpose.
Because this, to me, it's like if you were going after this, it seems like punishing a medium-sized streamer for something like this is a really dumb way to
do it. And so it might have been NVIDIA's PR team being dumb, which, should we get into that?
Happened before.
Happened recently, too.
With what?
Well, with this little thing where somebody kind of tried to ask where their order was available.
Oh,
yeah. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, that wasn't PR, though. That was customer service.
Okay, it was customer service. I'm sorry. But
So, yeah, on Reddit, somebody had posted about this, where essentially they pre-ordered the 2080 Ti, and
they shouldn't have, but anyway.
Maybe they're super rich and just don't care.
Okay, that could be.
When they went to pre-order the card, or maybe they're pre-ordering it to review. We don't know. When they went to pre-order the card, it said it was expected to ship September 20th. All they did was contact customer service via either like chat or email support.
They have a screenshot of this too, right? Or they just have like cutouts?
The text.
Okay, copy pasted.
But specifically, just requesting confirmation that it is still expected to ship on that date.
That nothing about anything. It was like very, very, very simple.
Yeah, it was
just
literally,
hey, is this order going to ship when expected on this date?
Yeah. And the response they got was, thank you for contacting NVIDIA. Your order is canceled.
And then take a short survey.
Yeah.
And it's just like, excuse me? Mm-hmm. Now, what we were saying is people that are doing customer service, a lot of times they're working with multiple customers at a time.
That's the downside to reaching out to chat or email support, is
rather
that
than
they are not
call.
Giving you their undivided attention.
Yeah,
it is
they're very
divided.
Yeah. So it could have been that somebody was like, hey, can I cancel? And then they just like typed in the wrong order number.
Yes,
like they had 7 chat windows open here, they had their other monitor here, and they're like, tap, 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 cancel. Mm-hmm. And then it auto replies. Yeah, or that too. Yeah. And so it's just like, oof. Now, you know what's going to be really funny is if it was just a copy paste to the wrong email or a chat response, but it was the right order number. So this guy still gets the card on time when he's supposed to.
Oh, no, it was canceled.
Okay, he double checked the order number.
Because this guy's reached out to multiple supervisors. He's had issues escalating.
And he hasn't been able to get it reordered then.
No, because if they just reorder it, he would lose his time or his slot.
Yeah, that's what I mean. They haven't been able to give him the slot back though.
And having worked in customer service, I can say the cancellation part of it, that was a major screw up by an employee. The bad process with escalation and not getting that done correctly, that was bad with employee. The not being able to restore the order is probably a system-wide thing, because generally you don't want that ability with employees.
Generally, you want, because when somebody cancels the order, you just shift one up.
Yes.
Right, and so
you have, if you were to have the ability to restore that very easily, then you'd be having an entire system of orders that could be messed with, and what happens when it gets too close to the order.
Yeah, and so somebody might have their pre-order expecting it on September 20th, and then it moves to 25th, and then to 21st, and then to 34th, but you know what I mean? So it moves around, and so they can't really do that.
And so having worked in customer service before, that part of it, I fully understand both why it's not so easy, and also that like they can't just ask a rep, hey, do this, and the rep can do it. Most of the complex stuff is locked behind like 5 or 6 layers of people.
Yeah.
For a good reason, actually. So it's complicated.
It is very complicated.
But speaking of not complicated things, do you want to talk about why you should just buy it?
Yeah, this is fun. I actually, I was considering writing a satire piece to go against this, what we hoped was satire, but most definitely seems to not be satire.
It's not.
And this is our last topic before we get into the fun rapid fire stuff here, guys. But Tom's Hardware released an article, and they've actually done some edits since then. But the article was quite literally titled, here, let me load it up, make sure I say it word for word, "Just Buy It, why NVIDIA's RTX GPUs are worth the money. Okay, now already that title, I saw that scrolling through my feed, and I was like, what? I was like, excuse me? Now, Tom's Hardware is a place I've considered a reliable source for a while. I like their reviews, especially their display reviews. They get into real good depth with them. Mm-hmm. But I don't trust Tom's Hardware at all anymore because of this one guy. Now, this is editor-in-chief. This is Avram Pilch, I think is how you say his name. I'm not going to apologize if I said it wrong, because you suck. So this here is just absolutely horrible. This article is basically an ad for NVIDIA saying that you should buy it, and it continuously contradicts itself. And Gamers Nexus actually made a video about this. Great on them. They had a lot of cutouts of explaining like an individual paragraph of why this paragraph makes no sense. Now, he's since made modifications, and he has a note in the bottom, and it's also gotten longer, and it looks like the note got removed.
No, it's not. It's in the bottom line, editor's note.
Is it editor's note. He said, I've made a few changes to the original copy of the story to clarify and clearly express my view that reading independent reviews of any new product, especially a pricey GPU, is generally a good idea. I've also added the disclaimer above to make it obvious to everyone that this is an opinion piece.
Yeah, they did add that right at the top. It says, note as with all of our op-eds, blah, 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 blah.
Yes, but that's so frustrating that they didn't think to put that in there in the first place. But second off, I don't really think they should be having opinion pieces.
Well, he's trying to claim in this that it's a counterpoint to their other writers.
But he didn't say that at first.
Because their other writer was... He also pretty much trashed their other writer in this.
Yeah, I don't even know if it's still in here. It was in the beginning of a paragraph where he says... he basically calls them garbage. It was horrible. It was really, really, really not cool. And
yeah, essentially he was saying that if you're like hesitant, then you're not. You pretty much shouldn't be, but in much harsher words.
Yeah, and like we were saying, so they had another article why you shouldn't buy NVIDIA's RTX 20 series graphics cards yet. But you don't write a contradictory article to that. That article has the contradictory in the title. Mm-hmm. Yet the whole point is don't buy a card until you know the data, and this is really stupid saying that why you should just buy it. Like, first off, the article name, just buy it?
Yeah.
No, you absolutely should not just buy it.
You should never just buy a $600 to $1,200.
You should never just buy anything. That's how a lot of supermarkets make all their money, is the just buy it section at the cash register.
Yeah.
You never just buy it, and especially not with super expensive stuff. You shouldn't impulse buy a $1,200 graphics card. I know people that have pre-ordered this already, and I'm like, what are you doing? I don't care how much money you have. You shouldn't be impulse buying this unless you are really planning to do a review of it. And it's just like, it's so frustrating. So let's go over a couple of quick paragraphs here. Let's see. I'm gonna read it. I'm gonna pick a good paragraph and read it. Here we go. This is my favorite one. Life is short. How many months or years do you want to wait to enjoy a new experience? You can sit around twiddling your thumbs and hoping that an RTX 2080 gets cheaper, or you can enter the world of ray tracing and high-speed 4K gaming today and never look back. When you die and your whole life flashes before your eyes, how much of it do you want to not have ray tracing?
Yeah.
So that was my favorite one there, end quote. First off, I'm pretty sure when I'm laying there with my life flashing before my eyes, I really hope that that's not anytime soon where I would think about ray tracing, but B, I'm not going to anyway. I'm sorry. Nobody's going to. When you're dying, you're not going to go, man, I wish I had the 20 series cards that I could have ray traced with. I'm sorry, but the only time you run into situations like that is somebody that's terminally ill but has 2 years to live. And in those situations, you can usually figure out a way to get what you want before you die and play with it. So that's not a good example, but you guys, I hope you guys get what I'm saying. But then also saying things like all right, first, the world of ray tracing and high-speed 4K gaming and never look back. Well, first off, you will look back when 8K gaming and full ray tracing real-time for all lighting becomes a thing. But second off, who says these are going to be ray tracing 4K gaming cards? We don't know yet.
Yeah, you have to know the performance.
You have to know the performance before you can say you can jump into ray tracing, high-speed, and 4K gaming right now.
Also, I want to point out They literally excluded this site from Wayback Machine so that you can't look at the previous version.
Oh boy, people have copies of it though. People have copies of it in places.
But I'm just saying,
like, they're embarrassed. So first off, Avram, if you really did try to write this as an opinion piece, you did a horrible job of it, and you shouldn't be working there anymore. And I'm sorry that you're probably feeling depressed right now because the industry actually hates you. But you kind of deserve it, buddy. I shouldn't even be calling you buddy because you deserve it. But
I would hope that an editor-in-chief would know better.
But exactly. If this was some small-time writer that's new to a site, you could maybe have the editor-in-chief go out and say, guys, this was an opinion piece. It's a new writer. He didn't clearly label it. We've talked to him, and we're working through this. This was a guy, this is your job. You're supposed to be good at this kind of stuff. And you did a horrible job of communicating this. You also wrote some of this like you were thinking, haha, this will be funny satire, and other parts where you're like, this is real serious. You should buy this. You need to keep better consistency in your articles.
Yeah.
Especially when it's an opinion piece. If this is an opinion piece and you meant it to be satire, it should be labeled as satire, not as an opinion piece. Saying, this is a satire of, oh, you should just buy it because these things are amazing, as like a joke to sell you to not pre-order it. So this is frustrating to everybody, and a lot of people are really mad about this, and I'm considering Tom's Hardware a much less reliable source, especially because this came from the editor-in-chief. I don't know what's been touched and what hasn't been touched by him, and what he might have broken. Now, of course, full dedicated reviews of displays and stuff, probably still a decent place to go, guys. We don't want to ruin them as a company. They still do the testing and stuff, but this article, you did some damage to your business. You might be making less money for a while because of this. Like, as a company, that was a big mistake, and you should feel bad about it, and you should step down, or you should fix your crap and make a response article saying, it was a mistake, guys, and I thought it'd be funny, or I thought it was satire, but instead you updated it saying, you blocked Wayback Machine, and then you updated it saying that you've added it to be more of an opinion piece and stuff, and it's like, that's not the appropriate way to go about doing this. It might have been a knee-jerk reaction to the industry yelling at him.
Yeah.
But even if that's the case, you should be more humble about responding and saying this was a mistake, because review sites make mistakes, and YouTubers and review sites make apologies all the time of, this was a mistake, we're sorry, we didn't mean to portray this, or we didn't mean to, we didn't review this accurately because of something was wrong with our equipment, and you need to be more open about that. So anyway, that's it for the Tom's Hardware article, but just be careful what you read from them for a little while, honestly, guys. I hate to say that, because they've been a pretty good source for a while. But that's it for our super big topics.
Yeah.
So basically, we've got a decent chunk of rapid fire news for you guys. Just some interesting stuff.
Yeah, pricing leaks from the Intel 9900K.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Pricing looks to be actually sort of similar to what we expected, maybe a little bit cheaper than expected. So Video Cards was the place that reported on this, and they're reporting that the i9 9900K and the i9 or the i7 9700K are already up for pre-order in some places. So these are kind of confirmed prices, but of course these are in euros, and it doesn't necessarily translate directly into markets. So we can make guesses, but you can't do a direct currency exchange. But
yeah, especially since, do we know if this is after Europe's VAT stuff?
Or... Yeah, we don't even know.
Because that makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
That could be a...
Because it was talked about that the estimated price for the i9 9900K is going to be $450, whereas in euros it's $561. That's a pretty big gap there. And so and then we're looking at maybe $350 for the i7 9700K.
Yeah, because
now
561 euros is $655.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, that's down. So we don't really know. This is kind of hard to take it with a grain of salt. I kind of expect $600 as the MSRP for the 9900K, though. Honestly, you're looking at a decent amount more money versus the i7 8700K. So
yeah, this is without VAT included. So this would be the core price of the chip.
Okay, interesting.
So I feel like those price translations then, if these numbers in Europe are accurate, would not be too far off.
Yeah, okay, which wouldn't be surprising. Yeah. So, and what it comes down to is the more interesting thing, I think, to a lot of people, and a lot of people are talking about and complaining about, is, oh, well, now they're ditching hyper-threading from the i7 name and putting it under the i9 name, because we're looking at 8 cores for the i7 9700K with no hyper-threading, and then the i9 9900K That's a horrible thing to say. i9 9900K. It sounds horrible. Like, you can't even say that, right? But anyway, being an 8-core with hyper-threading, so 16 threads to compete with AMD's Ryzen platform. Guys, shut up. That's all I can say about it, is shut up. Everybody's like, they're freaking out, and they're like, I guess this is my opinion, but they're freaking out saying, oh my goodness, they're removing hyper-threading. The term i7 never meant it includes hyper-threading. That's been the trend, but as far as I understand, Intel's never said i7 means it has hyper-threading. We've just seen a lot of, i5, i7, same part, i7 with hyper-threading.
There's never been an i7 without hyper-threading.
Yeah, right. But there have been i5s with hyper-threading, guys, on the mobile front. So the tiering, the i3, i5, i7, and now i9, those are tiers of performance and within a given product stack, like desktop CPUs or mobile CPUs. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily indicative of the technology behind them, of how many cores, whether or not there's hyper-threading, how big the cache is, what the clock speeds are like, how well they're binned. That's not necessarily what that nomenclature means. It's just a signification of the level of processor you're getting. If you buy a laptop with an i9 in it, as a generic consumer, that is probably, that is in the top tier of what I can get in this product stack. Mm-hmm. Now, there's multiple i9s, there's multiple i7s, and general consumers don't necessarily need to know that. They just see the marketing. Now, of course, marketing's marketing, and there's marketing BS that goes around. But again, I don't think i7 necessarily ever meant this has hyper-threading for sure. So, wanted to mention that, guys. Just stop complaining about it so much, please.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. It's just nomenclature change. Mm-hmm. They're not making it more complicated overall, because if you're one of the ones complaining about hyper-threading versus no hyper-threading in the nomenclature, you're going to know either way. So.
Yeah. NVIDIA's big format gaming displays have been delayed until early next year and are also probably going to be very pricey.
So surprising that these got delayed, just like the 4K 144 hertz monitors got delayed, right? It's like, we saw this coming.
Yeah. Essentially 65-inch 4K 120 hertz HDR G-Sync displays. There's a lot of stuff to talk about, but yeah, they're very complicated to make.
They're very complicated to make, as you can imagine, and we can also speculate, because of the 4K 144Hz displays that came out, we can speculate that these are going to be insanely expensive, because those displays that are out right now are $2,000. This is a 65-inch version of that with a shield built in.
Yeah, I don't know, because, when you look at it...
I have a feeling we're looking at $3,500.
That's probably... I don't think it's necessary, but I feel like that's likely just for the massive amounts of profit they'll make off of these.
Yeah.
But
because we know we're pretty sure they're making a ton of profit.
When you look at, when you compare the tech that is in TVs to the tech that is in monitors, most of the biggest difference is that monitors have smaller pixels, therefore they cost way more.
Yeah, the panel itself. Yeah, okay, that's a good point.
And so I think that's where I would both not be surprised if it was $3,500, but also not be surprised if it was $2,000.
Yeah. Okay. I'll agree with you on that. I agree on that. Yeah. So either way, it's a lot of money, but I think it'll be really cool. It's going to help home theater gaming.
Yeah. In fact, 4K 120 hertz HDR panels already exist.
So it's just a matter of making the G-Sync module work with it, and assuming the panel has a decent refresh rate fluctuation.
Yeah.
So it has to be a good quality panel, basically. Yeah. But, I like that NVIDIA is pushing forward and trying to make home theater experience on PC a little better. And hopefully, with Steam pushing, Steam's big picture mode, but, Steam OS and stuff like that, and Linux game support better, we might see a situation where if you want the premium console-like experience, you buy a Steam machine, you plug it into a 4K, G-Sync display, and you get this amazing experience.
What's funny, though, is that for NVIDIA, getting G-Sync on a TV-like device is such a big deal. Meanwhile, FreeSync is already on TVs.
It's already coming through
consoles. For about $2,000.
Yeah. And but it'll get cheaper too, and it's coming to it's on consoles, So it's like, all right. So the last couple topics we have for you, I can't talk right now. The last couple of topics we have here for you guys: FreeSync working on GeForce GPUs. Kind of, although more research into this, assuming NVIDIA doesn't block it, could be really good.
It'll get blocked.
It'll get blocked, I'm pretty sure. But Reddit user BRYF50 managed to get FreeSync functional on his GTX 1060. The way he did it is he used an AMD APU, a Ryzen APU, and he had the Ryzen APU output to the display, but he had the game render on the GPU, which is something that can be done, in case you guys aren't aware, is you can render on a given GPU and have it output through a different display interface, and that's something that's totally possible, has been done industry-wide. Like, that's something Windows can handle, is the GPU still doing the compute, it's just you have something else that's actually outputting.
Yeah.
And so he got it functional, and it seems to work with most games, but there's a few quirks with some benchmarks and stuff that some reviewers have tested. Of course, we'll want to see more testing on this, but what's interesting is I had somebody that noted to me, and I don't remember the name, but I had somebody that noted to me that what about a cheap, like really cheap AMD GPU? Buy like an RX 550, slot it in next to your 1080 Ti, and then you can use the cheaper FreeSync monitors. Now, of course, is a 550 cheap enough to, fluctuate that cost there, or can you just take that money and dump it into the monitor?
Yeah.
Right? But assuming NVIDIA doesn't block it, you might be able to do that, or if you have an older AMD GPU just laying around.
That supports FreeSync.
Yeah, that supports FreeSync. You plug it in. Like, say you had an RX 550 and then you upgrade it to something like a 1080 Ti later. Try it out, and then you can maybe use FreeSync and see how well it works, see if you can get it functional. And in theory, this might work through Intel GPUs as well, potentially.
That would be cool.
Which would be really cool, especially because a lot of people on the mainstream have Intel GPUs in your, 8700Ks, 8600Ks, 4690Ks, stuff like that. So it might be doable, and,
Apparently, PC Per tested it, and it adds input lag.
Okay, PC Perspective tested, but it's not a lot.
Yeah, it's still worse than G-Sync by quite a bit, but it's only
like
worse than FreeSync.
2 milliseconds more is what they measured about, or 2.5.
It's about 3. It's almost 3.
Oh, I thought that was a 5. My bad.
So essentially, in this example, on the 2400G, just running FreeSync natively, was about 29 milliseconds input latency. On a 1080 running FreeSync through that method, it was 31.9, whereas a 1080 just running actual G-Sync was 24.9.
Yeah, so, you're looking at some input lag there. I don't know how they measured that. I'll have to read into that more. Depends if that's measured, like, at the display, because, there's other things that can factor into that, of course.
Yeah.
So it's like, because, like, the 2400G just on FreeSync, if that was running a lower frame rate, that right there can cause more input lag because the frames are being rendered at a different speed.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see a little more in testing on that, but it's... From those measurements, it's pretty much negligible unless you're seriously a competitive gamer. Then, as a competitive gamer, like 2 milliseconds isn't necessarily a direct difference, but 2 milliseconds here, 3 milliseconds here, 4 milliseconds here, 1 millisecond here, it all starts to add up. And so when you can get the lowest possible on every front, that can make a difference, and so this could still affect you in that way. And of course, like you point out here, we're looking at like 7 milliseconds of extra lag versus G-Sync. G-Sync, we know, has very good response time. I actually would like to see some testing on fast sync and its response time, because I use fast sync a lot.
Real quick though, one thing, realistically, with how this could get blocked from, I don't know how they would do it for the APU, but it would be very easy to block a discrete GPU, because they can just say, AMD discrete GPU detected, and then do something to block it.
Yeah, and they could probably do the same thing with an APU, although it could get a little more complicated.
Then you're going to cause issues with anyone using an APU, potentially,
right.
because of something
And there are reasons to have extra GPUs and stuff too, though. So
yeah, but it's less common that someone would happen to have
like an RX 550 in their system along with something else. Versus an APU, they might actually be gaming off of that. Especially because it's very common for people to buy an APU, game off the APU, and then upgrade GPU later.
That's what I did when I was first getting into building my PC.
That's right, and it worked out really well.
Yeah.
So it's a good route to go if you want a PC now.
Until one day when I was having somebody else use that computer, the fan was not plugged in for the CPU, and it burnt the chip because AMD chips at the time didn't shut off when they got too hot.
I had forgotten about that happened. That was horrible. It wasn't me, luckily. It wasn't me that killed that chip.
No.
It
still worked. It just didn't work as well.
Yeah, that's right. I remember. I tried to kill an FX.
I think they still have it. The person that I sold it to.
Oh, I think you said. Sorry, I thought you said you think you still have it. The person. No. I'm like, wait, you still have the person? Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, they burnt my chip, so.
So they're mine now. Yeah, right. Are they in your dungeon? I'll probably just cut that out. Nope, not gonna cut that out. All right. So the last topic of the day, here you go, guys, is AMD launching the Radeon Pro V340, which is a GPU with 2 Vega GPUs in it. So it's a graphics card with 2 Vega GPUs in it. Really interesting.
Why don't they call it the VX2?
That would be really cool. I don't know.
Or
I don't decide their names.
The VX240. And then that way they could have other dual GPUs with like a 40, a 30, a 50, or
they
whatever.
could also have like, the VX 340 and 440. It's more GPUs in one card, right? No.
Eventually we get a card that's like this big.
Yeah, it takes up 7 PCIe slots, right?
It's just stacked GPUs. That's the new tech. Screw this stacked DRAM stuff.
Yeah, and all that, which is all about stacked GPUs in one card. You get this big box. It's like a power supply box, and you pull out the card, you just click. Yeah.
Or maybe they could just make extra thick GPUs. Like the actual GPU part of it. Is
right,
like twice as thick.
Just, yeah.
More transistors in the same...
I mean... We do some of that kind of stuff already.
Yeah, just do it more.
Just do it more. Just do it more. Taller.
In fact, if you get it tall enough, you could cool the sides.
I hate you. Why are we having this conversation?
You could have a cooler.
This isn't the rapid fire section, Daniel.
You could have a cooler that inserts around the GPU.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah,
I think
it might be
cool
more
from all
effective.
sides. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we'll have round GPUs. It's just a cylinder. Of
No,
GPUs.
you have slotted GPUs, so you can cool the inside.
I like it. Yeah. So
see, this is why NVIDIA and AMD and Intel should all just hire us.
That's kind of how we felt, is we should just run the whole planet. Because we're the best, right?
Yeah.
That was...
We'll cut holes in the...
That felt egotistical saying that. I was like, oof.
We'll cut holes in the whole planet and use that to cool the planet. That's how we'll beat global warming.
I think that's a great idea. Well, I don't think we should use it to cool the planet. We'll just pump the CO2 into the center of the Earth.
No, that would cause a fire.
It's already a fire. So anyway, continuing with the Radeon Pro V340, it's a new workstation GPU. So don't expect this in gaming. Although maybe we'll get lucky and see a dual 7nm Vega card coming out next year. Nudge, nudge, AMD, listen to me and do it.
Dual Vega 64.
Dual Vega 64. Well, if they don't do a die shrink, dude, they're going to need like a 12,000 RPM blower fan on that thing.
It would be called the System Destroyer.
Yeah, right, exactly. Like, recommended 1,500 watt power supply for it.
Minimum 1,500 watt.
Yeah. Like, and they include a pair of earplugs in the box.
Just like earmuffs for people that work at airports.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, it uses 2 of the Vega GPUs and 32 gigabytes of HBM memory. We don't really know much more about it. No mention of ray tracing, specialized stuff, or anything like that. Radeon Rays already exist, but there's not a ton of info on this. It looks cool and it looks powerful. And we know AMD's cards have been particularly good for specific compute instances, and this will probably be even better for that. And those of you wondering why they come out with dual GPU cards for workstations, but oftentimes not for gaming anymore, a lot of that just comes down to better density, because it's really common for workstations to slot 8 GPUs in their workstation, whereas gamers, it's not common for that, so the density isn't as important.
Yeah.
But that's all we got for you today, guys. That was a really, really short episode. I know there was very little that we talked about there. Well, guys, that's all we have for you guys today. This was WordCast number 61, assuming I remember correctly, and also said that right at the beginning. But
you did.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Well, you said 61.
I think that's right. No, that's definitely right, because I just transferred 60 from my SSDs to my archival. So, anyway, though, thank you, everybody, for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Check out all the links in the description. We've got our link to Patreon down there. We've got our link down there that goes to the sources for all these articles, as well as our other social media contacts and stuff like that. Twitter's a decent way to get a hold of us, or just in the YouTube comment section. As of right now, we respond to almost every single comment we get. That's something that we've tried to stick with pretty heavily, as I check comments very frequently. And other than that, we'll see you guys in the next one next week.
Bye.